Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody, or should I say privet, which is what the Russians say when they want to say hello to each other. And I say that because, and maybe you've missed this, but a story appeared in the Guardian newspaper this morning saying that apparently I am a person of interest to the FBI who will be asking me questions about my deep links and relationships with the Russians. Am I indeed the go-between between Trump, the Russians and Julian Assange? Am I the spider at the centre of this huge international web? And just to make things a little bit more confusing, I was pictured in the street today chatting with David Davis, the Brexit secretary. So there are some who are thinking, well, maybe it wasn't just Trump. Perhaps Brexit was engineered by the Russians as well. And I'm going to tell you quite a lot more about both of those events as this next hour goes along. Now, this morning was very interesting. I wrote a piece that went up on the Telegraph Online late last night, where I said that I felt that Theresa May, who had been the Conservatives', at least they thought, biggest asset, had now become their biggest liability, coming across as cold, impersonal, coming across as somebody who wobbles, no strong and stable, but U-turns, changes her mind, and frankly pretty insincere. So I predicted that we would see far less of Theresa May over the course of the next week, and a lot more of Boris, and I suspect David Davis, and I would guess after last night, Amber Rudd too. Well, sure enough, we now hear that the Prime Minister, Mrs May, has pulled out of a pre-planned interview she was doing tomorrow morning on Woman's Hour. And Boris was out there this morning batting on the television. And let's just have a little listen to what Boris was saying this morning.
Let's talk about the 350 million, which is so beloved of everybody who interrogates me. OK, people say to me this is a mythical sum. Actually, it's not a mythical sum. It refers to the amount of cash every week that this country does not control.
So, a number, 350 million. Isn't it funny? We get bombarded in elections or in a referendum with stats, with numbers, and we forget almost all of them instantaneously. But Boris, of course, put that number of 350 million a week for the NHS on his coach, which he drove round the country in, and the number has stuck. And ever since the referendum, the other side have accused the Leavers of telling a great big lie. But here was Boris this morning, actually tackling that head on and saying, challenging the Labour Party, saying, look, you know, what would you do with the money? Or would you claim this money back? Or would you go on paying the European Union? And he was defending very strongly the figure of £350 million a week that will be better off by not being in the European Union, which could, amongst other things, be spent on the National Health Service. And I'd like to ask you, if he's right, and if you believe him, how do you think we should spend that £350 million a week? And, of course, there is going to be huge contention as to whether that figure was correct or not. I wonder what Burkhan in Sidcup thinks. Burkhan, good evening.
Dr. Pezavut, comrade, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
I always make you laugh every time I'm on that.
Very good. So was Boris right to go on the offensive, saying that Brexit would make us better off by £350 million a week?
Yes, he was. He's been asked that countless and numerous times, especially when he was parading around the red bus, or the blue bus. But one thing I did want to say is, regarding the figures, now I've spent 75 million on the NHS, 75 million on social care, and the rest I would want to spend on free education for free university fees or college fees for children with parents earning less than 60,000 a year. Now, you're going to ask me why. This is a simple fact. No one can control immigration. The less skilled workers we have, the more immigration we're going to have. And what I think is it's important that we allow children to be able to have these. We should give them the tools they need to become skilled workers. And unless we don't give them the tools they need, we won't have them, and we will keep importing in our skilled workers, which is a bad thing. The fees are astronomical, £52,000 a year at the end of each course. Some people.
But I suppose, Berkan, the first question really is: will we have an extra £350 million a week to spend? Now, I have said since the beginning of that figure being used in the referendum campaign all the way through that I thought it was a mistake. And the reason I thought it was a mistake, Berkan, is because it's a gross figure. It's a figure, and Boris's argument today was it's a sum of money over which we don't have control. Well, OK, Boris, up to a point that's fine, because some of that, of course, is the rebate, is the bit we get knocked off that we don't send. And then, of course, Berkan, we get money back. Money comes back to farmers, money comes back to universities, etc. Net, we're probably looking at between 200 and 220 million a week. Now, we could, of course, say we ain't going to give the farmers the money. We're not going to give university research departments the money, but I very much doubt that would happen. So I think, honestly, in terms of what we could spend, let's call it just over £200 million a week. And, you know, you've got your priorities, and you think whatever's left over should be for free university education, if possible.
Yes, I think that's perfect. I mean, of course, we get the rebate back, but one thing I do want to say is we need to concentrate on these farmers and these fishermen, because they have done nothing but poured their heart into the Brexit campaign. And I think if we forget about them, that's going to be absolutely, you know, for a constituency, they will vote Liberal. Because I don't think, because if the right, who use the farmers as a big bullet point in the Brexit referendum, you know, if we was to give up on them, I don't think that will work.
No, and I can't see it happening, Berkan. I cannot see the farmers being let down. That the fishermen, I suspect, are not going to get the deal they really want. Berkan, thank you. George in Newton Ards, Northern Ireland. Do you think this figure of 350 million a week is right? Was Boris right to go on the front foot with it?
Is 350 million a week free trade? Is that what they call free trade?
Well, that's right, George. I mean, actually, I can't think of anywhere else in the world where you have to pay a membership fee just to have tariff-free access to each other's markets.
And then you have to have 300,000 Poles with all their families for the next 60 years?
Well, we certainly have the benefits, George, of open-door immigration to the European Union. This is right.
Yeah, but if I want a loaf of bread, do I have to have 2 Poles to go with it?
Well, I don't know about that. But, I mean, look, what you're saying is, actually, we should never have been paying this money in the first place, yeah?
And did we sign up to that?
Well, I think when we joined the club, we knew there'd be a membership fee, but it was considered in those days to be very, very small indeed. And, of course, what's happened is the project's grown, and it's let in poorer and poorer countries, and the bill for us keeps going up and up and up. You know, and net, we are paying, and anybody wants to challenge me on this, they can, but I have done my homework. Net, we pay in £30 million a day. So, as I say, it's just over £200 million a week net. And I just think, George, that had Boris stuck £200 million a week on the side of his bus, that would still have been a big figure. A big enough figure to make people think, wow, think what we could do with that money, and it would have been a net figure, and it would have been unarguable. And despite his attempt to try and turn this around on the Labour Party today in the election, I just wish he hadn't used that figure in the first place.
Well, that's a good point. But can you tell me also, Nigel, why is it all the callers that they call in, they refer to the hostility from Britain, but there's never a mention of the European hostility? Could you answer that?
Well, I mean, no, not really, but there is a lot of hostility that comes in our direction. It comes from Mr Juncker, and Monsieur Barnier, who's their chief negotiator, actually is rather more charming, but there's plenty of hostility. I mean, Verhofstadt, the leader of the Liberals and the European Parliament's chief negotiator, who's been quite a regular on LBC over the course of the last few months, I mean, some of his comments about Britain are absolutely vicious. So you're dead right, George. There's a load of hostility towards us. I I think we should probably never have joined in the first place. George, I thank you. Text and tweets, Nigel Farage, the spy who came in from the cold. Thank you, Jimmy. More of that in a moment. At Nigel Farage, Twitter. So, are Lady Gaga and Pamela Anderson also persons of interest too? That, of course, a reference to the fact they've been to meet Julian Assange. Yeah, but have they been to meet Trump as well, you see? Because there is a big conspiratorial web that was built up last year, at least that's what some think. Nigel, the 350 million, we could spend it on paper clips for all I care, as long as the EU don't get their hands on it, says Jan. Well, Boris's argument is they don't get their hands on all of it, but we've lost control of it effectively, because our rebate, of course, could change next year. Jeff in Redditch, what about this 350 million, and what should we spend our independence dividend on once we've left the EU?
Can I just say two things before, Nigel? Congratulations on becoming the red under the bed.
Thank you.
And congratulations on your performance on Blind Date.
Did you enjoy that?
Oh, I thought it was hilarious. Anyway...
Well, for those that don't know, Jeff, for those that don't know, I was asked to do a televised blind date, and I finished up with Boris's sister, Rachel Johnson, who is a Romaniac, and who has left the Conservative Party and joined the Lib Dems because she feels so strongly. But it's interesting, isn't it? You know, just because you disagree politically doesn't mean you can't get on as human beings. And she was great fun, Jeff, to be with. She really was.
Well, you could tell that. You could tell that. Anyway, the 350 million, from my point of view, I accept what Boris says. I just think the Tory party have badly handled the 350 million, because I think if they'd have actually said the rebates that we're getting back already, they were going to carry on for the next 3 years, whilst they carried out a review, and all that would be left over was this amount of money, that would have killed the thing stone dead. And then the money that's got left over, one of our big problems has been, with immigration, a number of people coming into the country, we haven't got enough money in the health service. You can't build social housing without putting some money into it in the first place. Education, we need to improve that. And care for the elderly, well, there ain't really much around. I mean, local authorities have closed nearly all their care.
I mean, this is the argument, Jeff. The argument is that net, we're paying in about £10 billion a year. And you know what? You can build a lot of hospitals for that money. Jeff, I thank you. In a moment, I'll tell you about why David Davis was unfortunate enough to be photographed with me on the street. Right now, you're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's 7:15.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Food banks dominated some of the exchanges yesterday. Jeremy Corbyn asking Amber Rudd if she'd ever visited one. Sarah in Tayside. Sarah, do you go to food banks?
I see women who are in the same situation as I am, who have to go to food banks, and it's not because of poor budgeting. I've got a degree of 2-1. If I didn't go, I would start.
Go any supermarket, 10 to 10 at night. Don't tell me no one can get there. You had £2, you could feed yourself for 3 days.
I also have a son that I need to look after. These things aren't just a simple equation.
But life is hard, but you've got to just fight it, man.
Oh, trust me, sweetheart, I know that life is hard.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast, every weekday morning from 7, only on LBC.
With Hampton by Hilton, now open in Aberdeen.
At More Than, we've learned that understanding your pet is tricky. For example, actually means I've dug some holes in the lawn for you. You're welcome. It's even harder to understand them when they're sick. So More Than Pet Insurance comes with VetPhone, a 24/7 free-to-call health advice line. Plus, new customers get 25% off online now. We do more than.
Divorce can be expensive. It affects your finances, assets, home, savings, pension, and most of all, your relationship with your children. It's probably one of the toughest times you'll ever go through. Cordell & Cordell understands these issues and helps men maximise their roles in their children's lives. Call now on 0330 60 60 161 or visit cordellcordell.co.uk. Office in central London. A partner men can count on.
Your future is here. The Global Academy in Hayes is a state school for 14 to 19-year-olds interested in a media career. Find out more at globalacademy.com.
My thing, minimalism. I like to pretend I'm living in a Scandinavian furniture catalogue. I like any colour, as long as it's white. Absolute white, white cotton, white mist. The only threesome I want. So when I got a red coffee machine for my birthday, it was never going to work. So sadly, it had to go.
With millions of buyers ready and waiting, there's no better place to sell your things than eBay. eBay. Find your thing.
The FCA has introduced a deadline to permanently end claims for missold PPI. When this passes, you could miss out. And with billions of pounds still to be repaid, some of that money could be yours. So call now and speak to Claim for Refunds. We have helped thousands win millions since 2009, and we could help you too. All we need is the name of your bank. So if you've had any loan or credit card, let Claim for Refunds find out for free if you had PPI. And if you have, you can claim yourself, or we can handle it for you. It's up to you. And if we don't win your money back, you don't pay a penny, guaranteed. You could be owed thousands and not even know you have PPI. Call 0800 180 8180 or text PPI to 88882.
It's how London buys its cars. Car Giant.
At Car Giant, when we say low prices, we mean low prices. We've up to 10,000 quality used cars in stock, and every single one is priced to sell fast because more cars are arriving every day. Car Giant. Our cars don't hang about, so you shouldn't either. Book your test drive at Car Giant today.
It's how London buys its cars. Car Giant.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Well, it was supposed to be Brexit Day, and Boris out there on the front foot, using the £350 million a week figure to say how much better off we'd be and challenging the Labour Party to match it. But there was another story that hit the news agendas today, and it was the fact that apparently I am going to be investigated by the FBI because apparently I may well have been part of a grand Russian conspiracy. And that was to devalue Hillary Clinton, to put in place Donald Trump, and by the looks of it, they may well have been heavily involved with the Brexit campaign as well. I am a person of interest to the FBI. Well, I'll talk about that. But in the middle of all of this, I'm innocently coming back from lunch, and I get out of the car, outside the office, and who, by complete fluke, is walking down the street but the Brexit Secretary, David Davis, who I know and like. I've known him for years. He was a good Brexit campaigner, and I'm pleased that he's got that job. So I chatted to him. He said, I'm not sure I should be photographed with you. I said, yeah, this so-called FBI inquiry, I said, it's bleep, rubbish. And then I realised there was a whole pack of photographers waiting for me outside the office, and the picture of David Davis and me in the street is out there, and people are speculating, is David also going to become a person of interest? Is there some great intrigue going on between myself and the Brexit Secretary over the general election? And folks, it's all nonsense. I literally bumped into him by complete fluke and accident in the street. And I'm really sorry if there are conspiracy theorists listening in that have been disappointed by that. And I'll tell you more about the FBI investigation in a moment. But I must get back to this £350 million a week that Boris was talking about so boldly across the broadcast media this morning. Is he right about the number? And if he is, how should we spend the money? Vince in Newport, South Wales, what would you do?
Yeah, thanks very much, Nigel, and thank you for all that you do for us. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And if the media in all sorts try to take you down the libel road, then make sure you take them to the cleaners, OK?
Right.
Now, going on to the NHS, yeah, absolutely. You were tired with a brush of that 250 million some time ago, wrongly, of course.
Wrongly.
Yeah, and as you say, let's talk about a net figure, 220 million, let's say, for the sake of argument. Yes, now 220 million a year equates to the current budget for this year.
A week.
Sorry, 220 million a week. I apologise. Yeah, sorry, I get mixed up with the 18 billion and the 10 billion.
That's all right.
220 million a week, right? Is roughly, that's a net for you. Is roughly 19% of the current NHS budget. Okay, per week. That's 234 million from the stats. So right, it's roughly 19-20%. That 220.
Yep.
Right now, that should be spent as the people require, on essential services. I would like it to be spent on the NHS and social services.
I'm going to say, and social care too, Vince, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Those two packages need attention. But like, if you don't mind me quickly saying, the more money you pour into some public service doesn't always solve the problem, as we know. So it has to be managed very carefully to go into the right parts of the services and not to fat back paychecks, wages to the hierarchy. You with me?
No, I am. So, Vince, we go on trading with Europe on whatever terms we can agree, but we don't go on paying the fee, and the health service benefits all of us in this country.
You're absolutely right. You know, we sign up to what you're saying, Nigel. Please.
It sounds like a good deal, Vince, to you and me. Please, somebody out there, tell me I'm wrong, that it's a rotten deal. It sounds really good to me, Vince, and I thank you very much indeed for your call. Yeah, the idea that I somehow was the author of this £350 million a week figure is fake news. Brian in Sandhurst, how would you spend the money, and how much is there in your view?
Oh, I haven't got a clue, to be perfectly honest with you. You get
fair
so
enough.
many numbers banding about.
Yeah.
But yeah, on that, I would definitely improve the services on the National Health Service and healthcare, but moreover on education, but catching youngsters younger at school and bring back the practical skills that we seem to be lacking. They don't have woodwork classes, metalwork classes. They don't have anything like that anymore.
You're talking, Brian, about trades and vocational training, aren't you?
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Which, for some reason, in this country, we seem to look down our noses at, as if it's a sort of shaming thing that our youngsters should want to learn these things. Odd.
Yeah. Well, I'm in the trade, and an awful lot of people who come to this country from Europe or wherever fill the gap because our young people are just not skilled enough or just not skilled at all. And I am, as an employer, employ trainees, and Nigel, you wouldn't believe the grief I have just trying to get them to hold a screwdriver.
Right, because they've received
nothing.
Yeah.
Everything seems to be IT based.
Yeah, or what about ologies, Brian? Lots and lots of people who've got degrees in ologies.
Yeah, everybody wants a degree in an ology of some sort or art, you know. But I do have another quick question for you, if I may.
Yes.
And the panic being that once we leave the EU, hopefully very soon, will be that they'll be slapping tariffs on the goods we export.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, they're banding around sort of 10% charge each country for the goods that we export to them.
Well,
and so if we were then to put a 10% tariff on everything we import, give our exporters their 10% back in a refund, would we not wind up with a big pot of money at the end of the day? Because we import a lot more than we export.
If, Brian, trade continued totally unaffected by reciprocal tariffs, the Exchequer would finish up being better off. That is exactly true. But I think it's important when we look at this tariff argument not to forget the rest of the world. The EU is not about free trade. The EU is a protectionist club that has a common external tariff that it puts on the rest of the world. That's why if you buy a Japanese-made motor car, you're paying a 10% tariff. If you try and buy, I don't know, lamb from New Zealand, you're paying a whopping great big tariff. And we could, Brian, outside of EU, bring tariffs down and make a lot of household goods in this country a damn sight cheaper. So
no, absolutely.
You know, so there are lots of possibilities.
But I'm talking specifically of goods that come from Europe.
Yep. No, you're right. You're right.
We import a huge amount more than we actually export. And if we paid back to our exporters the 10% tariff they would have to pay, obviously they'd be jumping up and down for joy, because they wouldn't be losing anything at all.
I think
and we would make an awful lot of money out of the deal.
Brian, possibly you're right. However, apart from motor cars, when it comes to goods, tariffs would on average be between 2 and 3%. In fact, so low on most goods that they would be lower than the movement in the currency and that risk that takes place every single month. But what you say is perfectly right and valid too. William, who's calling from Japan, Kyoto in Japan. Wow. William, good. What time of the day is it, William?
It's about 3:30 in the morning.
Right. Okay. I'm going to say, have you just come in from an evening out, or?
No. I'm just in Japan, as it were. Just travelling, passing through. But no, but thank you very much for having me on. It's a pleasure to speak to you.
Well, tell us what you got to say.
Well, I mean, just in regards to the in inverted commas, 350 million pounds. I mean, I think, I've been listening, and education is oft repeated. The idea it should go into education. But I think, I agree to an extent. It should go into education, but in a different sense. Namely fishing, because obviously you've got the common fisheries policy and the disastrous common fisheries policy, but perhaps the slightly more beneficial European Maritime and Fisheries Fund, which has obviously had an impact both positively and negatively on British fisheries. And with that going, I think action does need to be taken to ensure that British fishing remains at a stable level. And so I think that at least a section of that money should be allocated towards the transformation of fishing from, say, a more family or tradition, as it were, based industry towards something more vocational, perhaps on par with woodwork or plumbing or.
Well, there is an argument, William. There is an argument, William, that we will have lost some of those traditional fishing skills. But I would actually say that I don't, and perhaps I'll get condemned for this, but I've been a friend of the fishermen for years and years and years. I don't think they need a penny of government money. I think what they need are the reclamation of our territorial waters and a reasonable set of rules that work with better conservation measures. And I think, William, what would happen is large-scale investment would then come into the fishing industry and we wouldn't need government money.
Would you agree, though, that it would be a beneficial enterprise to get new blood, as it were, and kind of more of a vibrant, active
of course.
fishing industry?
Of course.
Part of which is through vocational skills.
Of course. And I during the referendum, a skipper from Norway came over and spoke to Scottish skippers, and I'd been part of getting him over here. And he said to the Scots, he said, you realise in Norway, every single week, a new boat is launched. Young people are coming into the industry. He said, and I can tell you this, and as Scotsman, I know you'll be interested, we're making a lot of money. And I think that the incentives, William, would be there for young people to go into it. William, I thank you for your long-distance call. We're out of time, sadly. Do call again. In a minute, I'm going to tell you the absolute truth about this FBI investigation and my involvement with Putin and the government and Assange and my part as the spider in the middle of that web. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30 and time for the news with Philip Chrysikos.
Labour is accusing the Conservatives of having the worst team to start Brexit negotiations. It's after the Prime Minister said there'd be a brighter future if there's a good EU deal. But the Lib Dems claim NHS workers would leave the UK following Brexit, while UKIP say it would cut the UK's foreign aid budget. A hotel in Manila has been put on lockdown following reports of gunshots and explosions. Images have emerged of plumes of smoke coming from the resort in the Philippines capital. Donald Trump is preparing to confirm if he's taking the USA out of an internationally agreed environmental deal. The US president will make his announcement on the 2015 Paris Accord from the White House in half an hour. LBC weather: dry across England and Wales tonight, heavy rain over Scotland and Northern Ireland, a low of 12 degrees. Tomorrow wet across most parts of the UK with brighter spells mixed in, a high of 27 degrees.
LBC Travel, good evening, I'm Mark Percy. Well, there are long delays on the North Circular in North London with queues eastbound from Colney Hatch Lane to the Great Cambridge Junction after an accident, and in East London the North Circular's also crawling from just after the Redbridge roundabout southbound to the Beckton roundabout, which is partly blocked by an oil spillage. That's also causing 15-minute delays on the westbound A13 from the Goresbrook interchange in Dagenham. On the M25 in Kent, there's a lane closed anti-clockwise approaching Clackett Lane services because of a breakdown. And to the east of Ipswich, there are long delays on the southbound A12 and the westbound A14 as visitors head home from the Suffolk County Show. For more real-time traffic updates, go to lbc.co.uk.
This is LBC.
I wish I could create content like videos and music.
But I need the skills to bring my ideas to life.
I wish I could write apps, but I need to learn how to code.
I wish I could get trained up for a media career.
While studying for my GCSEs and A-levels.
The Global Academy in Hayes is a state school for 14 to 19-year-olds interested in a media career. Find out more at globalacademy.com.
Integrated touchscreen navigation saves you getting lost.
You have reached your destination.
Hands-free keycard saves you fumbling around when your hands are full. Automatic climate control saves you overheating this summer.
And now save £750 on the list price on selected Renault Captur stock when you take a test drive plus 20% off accessory packs. Features available on Dynamique Nav, subject to availability. Order and register by 30th of June. Retail customers only. Participating dealers only. T's and C's apply. See Renault.co.uk/offers.
1 in 3 of us will have some form of dementia in old age. The Alzheimer's Show at Olympia on June the 9th and 10th is dedicated to helping those caring for or affected by dementia. Meet leading professionals, explore options for care, and discover the latest information, products and services. For tickets, visit alzheimersshow.co.uk.
Here at Sick Holiday, we have our own food scientist because we take getting food poisoning on holiday very seriously. It's not your fault if you get sick at a resort with poor hygiene. Most of us save up for 1 holiday a year, and to have it ruined with food poisoning is not acceptable. If you've been sick on a package holiday in the last 3 years, claim up to £2,000 per person, which could make up for the holiday you missed out on. Click sickholidayradio.com or text SICK to 66777.
Have you seen my keys anywhere?
Are they in the dining room?
Nope.
Library?
Nope.
Indoor pool?
Nope.
Outdoor pool?
Nope.
Tennis courts?
Nicer problems to have. This Friday, there's a £131 million jackpot. And 2 guaranteed UK millionaires. Euro Millions. Only from the National Lottery. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
On a travel pack tailor-made holiday, you get to see the very best of the world. Tour the famous Route 66, the spectacular Canadian Rockies. Experience the magic and history of India, the wilds of Africa, or the exotic Far East. Start your journey with Travel Pack. For amazing prices on your tailor-made holiday of a lifetime, call Travel Pack today on 0208 903 9999 or visit travelpack.com. Atoll Protected.
Leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
Well, we're talking about Boris Johnson going onto the front foot and saying we'd be better off by £350 million a week once we've Brexited. And is that figure right? How would you spend the money? We're also talking about whether, as a person of interest, apparently, to the FBI, I'm on the verge of being hauled off to be interrogated. And one other little thing that catches my eye is that in 25 minutes' time, Donald Trump will be giving a press conference in the White House where he will talk about whether America is going to stay part or withdraw from the Paris Accord on climate change. An accord where each individual state says by how much it will cut CO2 emissions, and whilst it's not legally binding, it was considered to be morally binding. And should Trump stay with the Paris Accord, signed up to by Obama, or not? My point on this has always been, whether you agree with Trump's view of carbon dioxide emissions and global warming or not, surely, as he was elected by the American people, clearly on that ticket, he should be able to take America out of the Paris Accord. If he can't, why bother having elections at all? Why not just set the course for the next 20 or 30 years? It just doesn't work. So in democratic terms, he's entitled to do it. I don't know what he'll do in 25 minutes. My guess is that he will say we're not going to stay part of it. But extraordinarily, my friend Mr. Juncker has been discussing this today, and he said that it was the duty of Europe to stand up to the US President Donald Trump if he decides to do this. And he added, the Americans just can't get out of the agreement. It takes 3 or 4 years to pull out. This is not the way it works. What levels of arrogance has this unelected, unsackable bureaucrat got that he thinks he can dictate the terms of Brexit to us, and now he thinks he's got the whip hand over the American president? Mr. Juncker, the days for people like you are numbered. Let's go back to Desmond in Watford. 350 million, Desmond. It's a bonanza, isn't it?
Hello, Nigel.
Hello.
Yeah, you're talking nonsense as usual, aren't you? I
don't know. Tell me. Tell me. I tell you what, Desmond. Tell me what I've said that's wrong.
Well, I originally wanted to phone in because you said something that was completely wrong a few minutes ago. You told a caller, right, that we pay a massive tariff on New Zealand land. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wrong, isn't it?
No.
No, it is, because New Zealand have a quota to allow them to import tariff-free lamb into Europe, don't they? About 250,000 tonnes a year, and they don't use up all of their quota. So essentially, they can export freely New Zealand lamb into the European Union. That's why when you go down to the store, the only lamb that's available to me is either UK or New Zealand.
And butter?
Right? But sheep meat from all other parts of the world does face quite a high tariff. That's why you only get New Zealand or UK. And another thing you told us.
What do we put on, Desmond? What do we put on Argentinian beef? Is it a 100% tariff? Is it, or how much? I can't remember.
It's on New Zealand now. I believe it's something. I don't know, something like 50. It adds about 50%.
I tell you what. Let's not, Desmond. Let's not bore everybody with agricultural tariffs.
Let's because you can't answer the question.
Well, hang on. I just asked you, as you're an expert on this.
Surely, no, I'm not an expert. I'm just someone who's done a bit of research. I've got an internet connection and an ability to read and
now,
write.
what about the 350 figure?
So there's one other thing I'd like to make before you waffle on. And you told a caller that we pay 10% tariff on Japanese cars, yeah?
Yes.
Well, you neglected to say that Nissan, Honda and Toyota cars are made in the UK. There's probably other makes as well.
What I said, Desmond, why don't you listen a bit more carefully? Why don't you listen a bit more carefully? I said we pay a 10% tariff on cars that are made in Japan and imported into this country, and that is a fact.
Why would you want a Japanese import when you get one that's built in this country?
Because people do, and actually we import a lot of cars that are made in Japan, Desmond. Now, Desmond, you could argue with me all night, and I'm sure you'd love to, but tell me, is Boris right about this 350 million a week figure?
No, he's completely wrong, because we're only going to have to pay 100 billion to possibly just to sit down and talk about a free trade agreement.
Well, I think...
And the damage... Sorry, Nigel, but the damage done to our economy through to Brexit is going to be a lot more than 10 billion a year. The government spends 800 billion a year. How much of a small knock to our economy is needed to wipe out 10 billion quid's worth of tax revenues? Not that much.
Do you not see, Desmond...
We're never going to yield that 10 billion.
Do you not see, Desmond, a massive potential benefit for us in re-engaging and being free to act with the 85% of the global economy that is outside the European Union?
Well, we can already do that now.
No, we can't.
There's nothing stopping me. If I want to export something to a Brazilian, I can do it, can't it? The European Union are not going to stop.
No, what we can't do is set the terms of trade. But actually, in a way, Desmond, you've made the best argument for us not even bothering with Article 50, not even going through the negotiation, just walking out, stopping paying our money and relying on, and you've made the argument superbly, and relying on World Trade Organization rules, because at the end of the day, if people like a product or a service and the price and they think it's reliable, they'll buy it anyway.
Yeah, well, you haven't actually answered the question. Or you haven't corrected your misdirection of the caller. That you told him that he's paying tariffs on lamb from New Zealand.
Yeah, no, hang on. We're talking about meat tariffs, butter tariffs, car tariffs. If Boris is wrong about the 350 million, and I think he is wrong, Desmond, but you still think that us being better off by a net 10 billion a year actually isn't worth it, because you think we're going to be worse off as a result of this for some reason.
You're like a wet fish, aren't you? At the end of the day, you misled a caller into believing he's paying big tariffs on New Zealand.
We're paying massive tariffs on everything. Desmond, we're paying tariffs on everything we buy from across the whole of the world. It is called the Common External Tariff. That is how it works. And I think the argument that the EU's for free trade is deeply, deeply mistaken. It may be free trade within the European Union, but with the rest of the world it's not. Whether it's bras or shoes or whatever it is that we import, there is tariff added to virtually everything. Jonathan in Lancaster, 350 million a week. Do you believe the figure, and what should we do with it?
Good evening, Nigel. Firstly,
good evening.
I'm not confident about the accuracy of the figure.
Yep.
But referring to what you said earlier about the EU being a club, we saw that when the abuse that they gave you in the European Parliament upon leaving when we voted Brexit,
yes,
we saw that the abuse they gave you was phenomenal.
And that was over this 350 million figure, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I tell you what, Jonathan, stay with me, because I just want to play you actually what I said on this during the referendum itself. Absolute fact from the 2014 official yearly statistics, cross-checked with the EU. We pay £55 million a day as a contribution. Some of that, David, is the rebate, which doesn't go, but our gross contribution is £55 million a day. In rebates and money that comes back in terms of grants and agricultural support, £21 million a day gets knocked off that £55 million. I think maybe the easiest thing for us to do on the Brexit camp is just to talk about the net figure. And the net figure is £34 million every single day, £10 billion a year, and I say that is too much, and we should spend that money here in our own country on our own people. Okay. So, Jonathan, I said that on Question Time during the referendum. I couldn't have been clearer that we should be talking about the net figure, which is about £220 million a week, and yet, Jonathan, they pinned it on me.
See, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Nigel, saying we should spend it in our own country. With that figure, we could invest in the NHS, but also in schools where, one caller said earlier, we have a vast sort of lack of skilled labour within this country.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, Jonathan. Almost everybody that's called in, whether they agree with the higher figure or the lower figure, but nearly everybody that's called in feels that the health service and education are the absolute priorities. I find that really, really interesting. And, Jonathan, I thank you for your call. I really am going to tell you absolutely the truth about this FBI story. But for now, it's 7:45. You're listening to LBC.
Coming up at 8 on LBC, Clive Bull.
The polls can't agree. Some predict a big Tory majority, others a Labour surge. What do you think is going on with this election campaign?
Clive Bull on LBC.
You know the saying, blink and you'll miss it? Well, you could use it for TalkTalk's Fibre Flash sale. Because for a very short time you can get TalkTalk Fibre, which is 4 times faster than standard ADSL broadband, for just £25 a month including line rental, for 2 whole years. It's Britain's lowest priced fibre compared to Sky, BT and Virgin over 24 months, saving you up to £535 versus BT. But hurry, the flash sale ends today. Search TalkTalk Fibre and join now. TalkTalk, for everyone.
Comparison with BT excludes voucher and is based on TalkTalk's faster up to 38 meg and BT's Infinity One up to 52 meg packages. Contract and conditions apply.
The big red building on Golders Green Road.
The menswear specialists Gold's Factory Outlet are holding their biggest ever sale, and it's on now. Genuine savings, 50% off all suits, jackets, coats, shirts, trousers, even designer brands in sizes up to 72-inch chest and portly fittings. Everything must go at Gold's, 110 to 114 Golders Green Road. Open Sunday to Friday till 6, closed Saturday.
The big red building on Golders Green Road.
When you hear a PPI commercial like this, you think, I wonder if I ever did have PPI, and maybe I should claim with the deadline being announced. And then you think, oh, but I'm not sure where my paperwork is. So you end up doing nothing. Well, here's the easiest thing in the world to do. Just text the word EASY to 60777 and the claims guys will conduct a free search to discover if you ever had PPI. And then you can decide to pursue the claim yourself or get the claims guys to do it for you. Text EASY to 60777 now.
The claims guys.
Hi, I'm here to trade in my trainers.
Trade in your trainers?
Yeah, they're really old. Didn't buy them here. Seen better days, to be honest. I wouldn't get too close. I want to put them towards some lovely new ones.
Sorry, sir, we don't do that.
Really? Vauxhall do. I just got £2,000 for my old banger to put towards a brand new car.
Yes, you can afford a new car. Scrap your old car, and on top of our other great offers, we'll give you £2,000 scrappage to put towards a shiny new Vauxhall. Visit your local retailer or search Vauxhall Scrappage for more information. Trading car registered in your name for at least 90 days. Offer available to individuals and small businesses. UK supplied vehicles only. Exclusions apply. Limited time at participating retailers. Full T's and C's apply.
You know you're Baroque from your rock, from your contemporary jazz, from your German underground progressive minimal techno. But do you know your pension options? PensionWise is a service set up by the government to provide free, impartial guidance about your pension pot.
If you're over 50, call 0800 138 1888 to book your free telephone or face-to-face appointment. Pension-wise, get to know your options.
Leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag #FarageOnLBC.
Is it right and proper that I'm a person of interest to the FBI? Could I be hauled in very soon and interrogated for my Russian links? Well, I'll tell you about that in a moment. For now, we're discussing Boris's really big attempt to go onto the front foot over this figure of 350 million a week once we Brexit. I get on Twitter, the EU pays back millions of pounds to help the UK's agriculture and research fields. I think you shouldn't omit such crucial info. I did that at 7:10. I made it absolutely clear that we do get money back for agricultural support and particularly funding research in universities, and I've always suggested all the way through this we should continue to do that. Surely, doesn't it make sense? We spent £6 billion last year on agricultural support, but only 3 billion of it in this country. We'll still be 3 billion better off on agriculture alone. We should give 220 million to our local councils and ask them to build more houses. If we all live in peace, we will do good. The Brexit bus never promised 350 million for the NHS. It said, let's fund the NHS instead. People should remember this, says Chris. Chris, I think you're splitting hairs there, frankly. I think what people read was that's where the money was going to go. End of. I love this. Stephen says, I could clear my bar bill with all that money. Well, I agree with that. I'm going to ask Sarah in Milton Keynes how she feels about the £350 million a week figure and what her priorities would be for our money.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well.
First of all, the 350 million, I don't even know if that figure's correct. I mean, when the Brexit campaign was going on, I got it that that's what we were giving them rather than, but the wording's changed. I've not heard this, it's 350 that we don't control.
I know.
So for me, it's almost that we're sort of spending the money anyway. They're probably spending the money. But let's just say, for argument's sake, we have got some money left over, then I would put it into affordable housing.
Yes.
I'm in the construction industry in that I've sold building materials for over 25 years, or getting on for that now. And for me, building materials haven't really gone up that much. I mean, a bag of cement 15 years ago, not much different. And I don't know, honestly, how they can... I mean, obviously, I know you've got London and one thing or another, but I've lived and worked all over the UK. But it's just ridiculous.
Sarah, you're in Milton Keynes.
Yeah.
I mean, what would you describe as an affordable home in the Milton Keynes area?
Well, I've got a decent job. I've got a nice car, and I'm only going to be able to afford something around the 200 grand mark, which is a 2-bedroom flat.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's once you get past this area, obviously it gets a bit. But I'm just wondering. I mean, as you can probably tell, I'm from up north originally, and I don't know what to do for the best. Whether I'm going to buy down here or get something up north or whatever. But it's just, I think also if they do it, whoever does it, they need to keep hold of that land, because as soon as they start to sell it off and outsource somebody to sort this problem out for it, it's that when it goes wrong. Because I think Mr. Prescott he tried it, and then by the time he'd finished, they'd just put it back on full market price. But
the problem is, if a local authority builds houses and then sells them at far below what the market price for those houses would be, who should it sell them to, Sarah?
Well, I think it's on a priority. I mean, they used to, back in the day, obviously there were there were waiting lists and one thing and another. I've never even gone on a waiting list because I know there's supposed to be means tested. I've always had a job. I've always sort of sorted myself out, as it were. But I know that it'd probably drag some of the market down, but something's got to be done. It's just ridiculous.
Well, I think, Sarah, you've added a new dimension here, because everybody's been talking about the health service, they've been talking about education, but I do think affordable housing is a massive issue. And for the under-40s, in many, many parts of the United Kingdom, for many of them, they really are generation rent, and their prospects actually of ever getting on the housing ladder have diminished. The problem is, Sarah, as I say, if you build public housing and you sell it way below market price, who comes at the top of that list? It's a hell of a difficult thing for the authorities to do, but I thank you for your suggestions. Concerned on Twitter says, Nigel, you haven't told people that UK fishermen sell 90% of their fish to the EU. Well, of course they do. They sell it into the Boulogne market, most of it. Why? It is the biggest, most reliable market in the whole of Europe, and we're only allowed to catch, by value, less than 20% of the fish that by right could be ours. In fact, most fish and chip shops, if you buy cod and chips at almost any fish and chip shop in this country, you'd be pretty certain that it wasn't cod caught in this country. It will have been imported from Iceland or from Norway. In fact, in the English Channel, concerned on Twitter, our ratio, our percentage of cod that we can catch in the English Channel, 7%, and the French get 78. All right? So I think we can do a better deal on fisheries. Ard in Balham. Where would you spend the money, Ard?
Hi, Nigel. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. Yeah, so, I would probably go with a mainstream answer. Spend it, on the NHS, spend it on education. But on the whole, I think getting out of the European Union, it seems like we'd lose more than that 350 million. And the one question I wanted to ask, so I work in the financial sector. It just, and that seems to be a big part of the UK economy. It's one of our big exports. It just seems like the way it's set up, we export financial services specifically to Europe. It doesn't strike me as something we can actually export to the US or Australia or New Zealand or anything else. So do you see some sort of rebalancing with the financial services sector becoming less important? And is that a problem?
No, I don't, because actually the way that I look at this is the City of London, if you want to call it that. I mean, what I'm talking about, our financial services industry is a success, not because it is the market for the UK, not because it is the market for Europe, but because it is a global market. In areas like foreign exchange and what have you, it is a genuine global leader. And I personally feel that a lot of the regulation that has come onto our equities industry, our insurance industry, actually has been driving business overseas. So I'm not concerned by this argument, although I do hear it from the big banks and the big institutions. What part of financial services do you work in?
I work in investment banking, but I know, I mean, I get it. It is one of those things. It's almost taboo to talk about it or ever seem to take the side of people working at banks, and I get that. But say by out of the single market, I mean, do you think we can access Europe in the same way? Because you have this passporting service. I don't know the details.
Again, and as I said to a previous caller on tariffs and agricultural products and things, we can get a bit too technical here, but in simple terms, you don't need a single market passport to trade. You need equivalence in terms of your regulatory regime, and we would most certainly more than qualify for that. I think there has been some tremendous scaremongering, Ard, on this, as there has been on much else. But really, I wouldn't be desperately concerned. The rest of the world in financial services is growing very, very quickly. That's where the big opportunities will be. Ard, I thank you. So, it was late morning this morning, and suddenly, up online on The Guardian, we get this story that I am now a person of interest and to the FBI, and the sort of web that's been created is that I know Trump well, and I have visited Trump many times, and I know personally some of, and have known for some time, some of his support team and some of his strongest allies. And I also once met Julian Assange. Therefore, effectively, I must be the bag carrier. I must be the go-between between the Russians, Trump and Assange. Why is all this happening? Well, it's happening because, frankly, there are large sections of the liberal elite that simply can't get over Brexit and Trump of last year. They can't believe people would do this. So there must have been some grand conspiracy, and the Russians fit the bill. Well, let me tell you this. I've never been to Russia. I've never done business in Russia. I've never had a bank account with the Russians. I've appeared, I think, 3 times on Russia Today in the last 18 months. I've been on Al Jazeera more than I've been on Russia Today, and I'm hardly supporting jihadis or anything crazy like that. And as far as Julian Assange is concerned, I went there because LBC, maybe they're the ones that should be investigated. LBC organised a meeting between me and Assange on the basis that I might do an interview. This whole story is fake news. It is hysteria, totally out of control. It is complete and utter baloney. I hope that's clear. Thank you for your calls, texts, tweets, and messages this evening. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'm back on Monday evening from 7. Coming up at 10, it's Ian Collins, but up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you. And coming up, we're going to talk about the general election campaign. The polls cannot agree. Some predict a big Tory majority, others a Labour surge. What do you think is actually going on in this election campaign? There's 1 week to go, and nobody seems to know what is happening. Donald Trump is about to announce his position on the Paris Agreement on climate